Today, I've got a special little treat for you. We are down in the hills above San Diego, LA. We're at the Eagle Mine, the old Eagle Gold Mine near Julian, California. And we're going to take a tour of the underground workings. We're with Rick here. He's going to give us a quick tour and through the mill, and he can show us around.
All right, I'd be happy to.
Okay, thanks, Rick.
As you can see right in front of us, it's arched. It has rounded arch ceilings. That's where they were using hand tools to dig their way in. Picks and shovels and hammers and chisels. Later on, you'll see it open up, angled and fractured. You know they were blasting their way in then. So folks, in 1870, they hadn't harnessed electricity yet. They were relying on candle power to light their way in.
Wow. Is that an actual hat?
This is an actual miner's hat. Now, so folks, I'll back up a little bit here. When they closed the mine in 1934, the miners thought they were coming right back. That was, Congress formed the central bank. Franklin D. Roosevelt signed an executive order recalling all the gold from the citizens. You had to turn in your gold or you were a criminal. Sounds familiar. Folks, so in 1934, the miners thought they were coming right back. They couldn't work anymore because they couldn't hang on to their gold. So in 1934, they just threw their hands up. They threw their tools in here, they pushed the mine cart in, and they piled rocks in front of the adit, thinking they'd be back sometime very soon. Well, 30-some years went by, and the descendants of those miners then sold the property to this gentleman's grandfather back in 1965. Wow. Anyway, back to this. This is their lighting. They could have had, the option would have been oil lamps, but oil lamps were very much of a fire hazard. If you kicked an oil lamp over, you could start a fire that could have been catastrophic. So, candle power, if you dropped a candle out of your hat, it would probably go out and leave you in the dark. So a safer alternative. So back in 1870, these men were just showing up after the Civil War. Typically they ended up all being Confederate soldiers up here. And it wasn't strictly by accident, because all the people were coming from the East Coast after the Civil War. The ones that ended up in San Diego from the South were basically rejected by Alonzo Horton. The developer in San Diego didn't like Southerners. So if you showed up looking for a job with a Southern accent, he told you to just, there's the door. So all those people then migrated into the backcountry here. And that's why we have rednecks back here. All the Southerners ended up here. So now these guys were smaller men. They were only 5-footers, basically. It just had to do with the protein they had back then. So you guys watch your heads. So you can see the tooling, hand tools, picks and probably all chisel marks, and here is the stratifications of that subducting seafloor here. Gold mining was discovered in 1869 in the backcountry here due to a winter storm that churned up the sand, exposing the gold in the creeks. So Fred Coleman was the first one to find that gold. He panned that gold and ran off to San Diego to cash it in. He bragged about it all the way there and back. So Fred Coleman single-handedly started the gold rush in the backcountry.
Wow.
That was in the winter of 1869. By the spring of 1870, that storm had dried up. We were in the middle of a severe drought, so the creeks were dry and they had no way to pan. Now, again, the creeks dried up, so they started scouring the hills looking for the source of the gold. They knew it was the hard rock mining, the quartz. So they scoured the hills. They saw the outcroppings all running parallel to each other, so they came in this perpendicular tunnel, this crosscut tunnel, and found this bucket of quartz here.
Oh, wow.
So they would have seen this as an outcropping on the surface.
Wow.
Now, when they sampled this, they got enough gold, at least an ounce per ton, so they followed it in this drift tunnel. So the tunnel drifts with the pocket of quartz.
Wow.
And this crosscut tunnel is basically its main purpose is access and discovery of these pockets of quartz.
I see.
How far down does that go?
This goes about 100 feet. This is that Jurassic age rock. They have to dig out 10 ton of this metamorphic seafloor to get to a ton of quartz.
Wow.
To get to that ounce of gold.
Wow. Yeah.
So that's why that one, and once if less than an ounce of gold, they're just going, it's not worth it. Watch your heads here, everybody, little overheads. Now I have to tell you about the star vein here. The star vein is basically, it was named the star vein because of this compression fold in the slate. Now you've got a compression fold here, which basically is in a wave pattern. And that wave pattern, again, this wave pattern up here and this combined look like a star to the miners. You can see points of a star. So they named this a star vein. But it turns out to be a star for another reason, folks. The star vein drift tunnel, they got up to 10 ounces of gold per ton.
Wow.
So that was their richest find. Folks, so here we are in the High Peak mine. You can see the ceiling here is angled and fractured. They were blasting their way in. Now, there's evidence of the blasts here with these blast holes. These are remnants of blast holes. They are all over the ceiling here. You can see here. Littered the ceiling. Now, when the miners were advancing the tunnel, they're also down low. So like right there.
Wow.
When the miners were advancing the tunnel using blasting, in this case they were using blasting powder still. Dynamite was right around the corner here. They was invented about 1870, so whenever it made it to the West Coast, I'm not sure. But when they were blasting their way in with blasting powder, they typically dug 5 holes in the rock, 3 to 4 foot deep each. And they drilled them in a square pattern with one in the middle. And the old traditional style of drilling those holes is with a 3-man crew. One miner holding a chisel and his 2 partners striking that chisel with sledgehammers. So the miner holding a chisel, of course, he had 2 main tasks right now. He had to hold a stable target so his partners didn't miss. He also had to keep that chisel from getting stuck in the rock. So as they're taking turns striking that chisel, he has to back it out and give it a quarter turn. And that way, so once he's got 5 holes drilled 4 foot deep, typically they could then, would be the end of their shift. They would exit the mine. The powder man would come in and fill those holes with the blasting powder and set off the charges. Once the smoke and dust clears, fresh crew would come in to start their shift. And they would start by gathering all that broken rock from the explosion. They called mucking. Sorted the quartz from the metamorphic rock and got it out to the processing areas. Maybe after mucking, they might cut some ties and lay some track or go work somewhere else. But ultimately, before their shift was over, they would have drilled those 5 more holes in the rock to repeat the process.
Wow.
All right, folks, come on. Let's turn the corner here. Now, right in front of us, though, on the left are 2 drift tunnels. And then right in front of us is the shaft that goes down 400 feet, where they use that hoist bucket. So these shafts here, this tunnel here is a drift tunnel with a stope. This has a stope, which is basically a German word for step. So they dug this on the way. They stepped their way up here all the way to daylight here. So there was fresh air coming through that top up there.
Oh, really?
So they'd actually climb out to get out of the mine? Or?
They could have.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But no, they probably they made their way up step at a time. So they were.
Yeah.
So is it just covered up right now?
They covered it up. They backfilled it. That's why you see boulders right up there.
And then that's the shaft right there?
Well, that's a tunnel.
Oh, okay.
Now,
was the purpose of doing that still to get?
they were probably
Quartz or-
following a quartz up there.
Okay.
So they would have followed the quartz and then just kept going to fresh air. So they had fresh air coming through here.
Oh, that's
So-
the shaft. Okay.
So this is the shaft. This is the vertical shaft that goes down 400 feet, and this is the hoist bucket that would have delivered those men to the various locations. This tunnel here is another drift tunnel. They dug this one before they dug this one over here, and this here is just backfill. This isn't collapse. When they dig one tunnel, instead of hauling all that dirt out of the mine, they just fill some old used up tunnel. This one they exhausted the quartz. So instead of taking all the rock from here all the way out, they just threw it over here. Saved them a ton of labor. All right, the hoist machine. Put some light on that. This machine was brought in here in 1869. It's an old internal combustion engine. They call it the Hit-and-Miss engine. So, folks, at each of the 5 levels in this tunnel, in this shaft beside us, they would have had platforms at each of those levels and a bell at each of those stations where they could communicate with each other in a fashion similar to Morse code. Now, they also had this chart at each of those levels so that they didn't misspell their messages to each other. So, for instance, if the operator heard the miners ring 2 bells in one, he knew they'd loaded that bucket with quartz. He could full speed it out. Whereas if the operator hear the miners ring 3 bells in one, he knows they are in the bucket. The men are in the bucket. He's going to bring it up nice and gently.
Wow.
Now, hopefully that operator never heard 7 bells in succession. It would have let him know they were having an emergency down below.
Wow.
So, all right. Anyway, this machine was brought in here in 1896, folks.
Still run?
It still runs.
Still runs.
Yep.
Of course.
It's indestructible. There's this thing has a, and plus it's in the there's the piston. You can see the piston right there.
Yeah, look at that.
So this machine was run. It ran on any low grade fuel, gasoline or whiskey or anything like that. But it was also it wasn't like, it didn't idle all the time. It wasn't like a diesel bus running. It only ran on demand. It had a centrifugal switch. Now it was operated. It would get up to speed, and these flywheels would keep the momentum going.
Oh, yeah.
Now, once it started to slow down, the centrifugal switch would close, igniting the magneto, and it would fire, bring it up to speed. That centrifugal switch would open, and it would stop firing. So no fumes while it was up to speed. As soon as it started to slow down, it would fire and then stop firing once it got up to speed. So these flywheels were the force, the momentum that kept it, or the mass that kept the momentum going.
So this had cable that would run.
Correct. No, it didn't have cable. It had wire rope. So yeah, they call it wire rope. And the only difference is nowadays they call it cable. It's like electric cable. But you're right. It was cable. They called it wire rope. And it would have been a spool of wire rope draped around this pulley. This pulley would have been part of the structure right there. It would have had that pulley centered over that shaft, and that hoist bucket would have been connected to that wire rope. All right, folks. Hey, well, here's that pocket of quartz right here that they would have been following from the very beginning. On the outside of the mountain, they saw this pocket of quartz and followed it right in. This thing is up to 20 inches wide. All right, folks, come on and check out this pocket of quartz as we're going. One thing that was like, oh yeah, to me, is that this pocket of quartz is all rusty. But then if you look over here, you'll see it's not rusty. Well, this is a fresh break. This is probably what the quartz looked like right when they broke into it. And over time, it oxidized. So right here, you can see what it would have looked like to them originally. It hadn't oxidized yet. We are in the heart of the mountain right now.
So what were the?
We're 500 feet underground. I mean, horizontally, and probably 200 or 300 feet underground vertically.
Wow.
So, folks, now let me tell you about this. Upper left corner depicts the hill. It's kind of a elevation. You've got the 5 pockets of quartz lined up here, all parallel, and this horizontal line here represents the crosscut tunnel we came through downstairs, cutting across these pockets of quartz. And right here is where we are now. We'll follow this tunnel out that way, that pocket of quartz. But this is the 2 miles of tunnels we came through, or that they're in the mine. We're not going through them all. But we came through here. Now this is a bit of a kind of an odd isometric drawing here. Maybe you could tell me a little more about it because it's confusing to me. We came through the Eagle Mine this way. We saw the Star Vein. We stopped here and talked about all the work they did in the Eagle Mine. The hoist room, and here's where we are right now in the foreman's office, looking up at that stope, 432-1.
Okay.
So, and then, so it's really hard. This is a vertical, but it's really hard to understand it because of it's an isometric drawing, and it's really hard to get the feel of the 3-dimensional of it.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Hey, let's step into the foreman's office here. You see, the foreman had an office with a view. So, the underground foreman kept about 15 men busy per shift here in the High Peak mine. And he knew what his men were doing and where because he assigned them a place to work and a task. So, he also kept track of the number of mine carts that exited every day and would never send this mine cart down the tracks where men on the tracks. So that was part of him keeping control of the men and keep everything safe. Now these men, I was telling you, had a candle on their hat for lighting. Now they probably had a spare candle in their pocket with some matches. But typically those candles would have gotten broken during the day, crushed from hard work. Their matches would probably get sweaty and damp, and they may not work. So the underground foreman always had fresh candles and matches for the miners. Always kept fresh lighting for them. So I would like to do the demonstration now of the lighting the miners had with candle power only. So let's see what that looks like. I'm going to light 3 candles. It'll represent 3 miners digging those 5 holes in the rock. 2 of them slamming hammers into a chisel. Let's see what this looks like, folks. I'm going to spread these around a little bit here. So now you've got 3 miners working here, and now that's enough light to see your partners. You can tell who everybody is. You can see the chisel you had to strike. And you could see the quartz you needed to find.
Wow.
So all in all, that was enough lighting. But your eyes are going to adjust to this.
Yeah.
Right.
In 5 minutes, it will seem much lighter. And within a half hour, it'll seem a lot more like twilight. It takes about a half hour for your eyes to fully adjust. So, and then they would be working in, again, like nearly twilight conditions. But now, once they finished drilling those 5 holes, they could finish their job. They'd exit the mine. So they're exiting the mine when one miner decides he's got to go back to a different tunnel and get some tools he left behind. So now there's only 1 light. But now, what if he then brushed up against the low overhead and snuffed out his candle? It got really dark for him. Let's see how dark this mine is without light. So you could see where you could get disoriented. You could turn around and walk the wrong way or into a wall, smack your nose before you even knew the rock was there. And so the miners knew what to do if they were caught in this situation. They would find the tracks with their feet. They would scooch down, cover their forehead with their forearm, and inch down the tracks to safety. So, Mr. Geologist, I got a question for you.
Okay.
Now I'm looking at down there in the hoist room, and there's all this black like this. And at first people go, "Oh, is that soot?" I go, "I don't. It's not soot because look, it's here. What is this?"
Oh, that's that schist you were talking about, that slate.
That's the slate. Okay.
When the slate gets metamorphosed, it gets that shiny black.
Okay, so this is all the same thing, but so this is just slate. This in between the layers of the schist.
Yep.
Like blackboard slate?
Yeah, blackboard before it got metamorphosed.
Okay.
But yeah,
would that be possibly volcanic ash or anything like that?
It would probably be like a layer of fine silt on the seafloor. And then, because it goes in layers, they're all layered.
Right.
So it's a different layer
Correct.
of silt or sediment, and then a different layer got
Correct.
deposited on top.
And I was thinking, and I could be wrong, but that this could have been just like volcanic ash.
Could have been,
settling.
yeah. Or the river 500 miles away that dumped into the ocean could have had a big flood and
Exactly
blow.
that.
Yep, exactly.
Right. So all the slate here is basically deep ocean sediment. It's all superfine particles from just turbid water.
Mm-hmm.
No coastal sediment, just fine particles settling in the lightest murky water. So that's how this layer got there. But I didn't know if it was slate or not.
Yeah, it's it'd be like a slate.
I appreciate that. Because when we're downstairs, people are going, "Oh, that looks like soot." And I go, "I don't think it's soot."
Yeah. Well, the next geologist can prove me wrong, I guess.
No. Folks, now once that powder man lights 5 fuses, he's got to get away from the blasts before they happen.
Right.
Well, he doesn't have time to exit the mine. It's just too far to go. So this spot here was designed specifically for the powder man. It's called a jump hole. Once he lights those fuses, he runs and jumps in here to let those blasts go shooting down this tunnel here. Now, he would have been turned around with his ears plugged and his eyes closed and listening for 5 explosions because he lit 5 fuses. And then if he only gets 4 blasts after lighting 5 fuses, he's got a problem. One of his fuses may have gone out, or it might just be sputtering. And now that's his problem, because he doesn't know whether that fuse has gone out or not. He'll end up waiting an additional half hour or so until he's reasonably convinced that fuse has completely gone out. Then he has to go find it and replace it. Once he's set off all 5 charges, he can exit the mine. Now then a fresh crew comes in to start their shift by mucking that debris. So, folks, the powder man did have a hazardous job, and he did make double the miner's pay, whatever that is. I've heard different various that they were making $1, he was making $2. I've heard they were making $2.50, and he was making $5. So I don't know the true story on that. Maybe it's just different parts of history.
That's the end of the mine tour.
All this over here is all the tailings. All this property here is all tailings. This was a canyon here. All these levels here were tailings from out of this mine here, as well as what we're standing on here. Yeah. And some of those levels below, from that the 7 through 11, the lower levels. Now some of those levels came out in down here.
Oh.
They didn't have to necessarily enter and exit through the that hoist bucket into that shaft. But during the day, if that was their business, they were there. But they might have exited in the evening or in the morning, come through the canyon into the mine that way.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just what went to the bank. Right. A lot of the gold went to jewelers, and that was because it was very desirable to jewelers. So that was unrecorded. That was all private interactions.
Sure.
So whatever went to the bank ended up going to the mint in San Francisco. So the government was their number one customer.
So what'd you say, 57?
Yeah, 57.
1,000?
57,000, I guess divided by 20.
Plus how much for the
26.
26,000?
Yeah.
today's that would be about $8 million, right?
It's double. No, it's 100 times. Whatever it is.
100 times.
$20 an ounce. $2,000
Oh, there you go. Yeah,
an
so
ounce.
4 million.
Yeah.
Is that right? How many
That's
zeros
about
do we
right.
have?
Yeah, 4,000 to 4 million.
Four. Yeah.
There you go. So
Yeah.
about 4 million.
Four
Thanks.
million.
Okay.
There we go.
There you go.
So I don't know if you can see that one proud tree on the top of the hill. Oh, you were there. So that's where we were.
Yeah, right about there. Yeah.
All right, folks. So welcome to the 5 stamp mill. This is a stamp mill. Crushing is more affectionately known as a rock crusher, but it's a 5 stamp mill. Now they make these stamp mills up to 40 stamp mill, but this is a 5 stamp mill. It's a kind of an abbreviated one. But again, all the gold in Julian is in fine particles in quartz. So they have to crush the rock to get the gold out. Now, besides gold, there's a small amount of silver and copper as well as iron. You can see the iron right there on the surface. So we have to crush this rock to get all those metal particles out. That's why they have this machine here. Now, it was powered by a wood-fired steam engine that turned that giant flywheel. It took about a quarter wood a day to run this machine. But it rotated that camshaft and raised those rods. Each of those rods weigh 1,250 pounds. So that's a huge hammer. That's a big, heavy hammer, 1,200 pounds. This is the bottom of that hammer. This is just the hammer, the smack head on the bottom of those rods, landing on the anvil here or the stamp pad. So these two are coming together to crush this rock, which crushes pretty easy. Look at this. It doesn't take much, but there it is, fine, fine powder. That's what they're trying to get right there.
So these are 1,250 pounds in that slider? Or is
Those rods
okay.
are 1,200 pounds.
Okay.
And this is attached to the bottom of it.
I see.
You can see them right through there.
Right, that's why that's open there, so you can see them. So as they're crushing this rock, they would be adding water to the mix, creating then a slurry. This gate is open right now, so you can see the stamp pad and this hammer head, but otherwise that gate would be closed. Water level would be at least as high as that painted rod there, that silver bar going across, and even as high as you can see on that screen, the high water mark. And you can see also how fine that slurry was coming through that screen. On this ramp, they had a sheet of copper, and on that copper they spread mercury, creating an amalgamation plate. Mercury has an affinity for precious metals, sort of like magnets in iron, a little bit like static electricity, but it's going to cling to any of the precious metals. So as that slurry makes its way across this amalgamation plate, the metal particles are drawn into the mercury, and the mercury will just hold them there, while the quartz and the water roll right over the top of that mercury, that amalgamation plate, onto the secondary filter. Now, they had a secondary filter here because that amalgamation process only gathered about 85% of the particles. Some of those particles might be riding on some quartz and not respond to the mercury. But 85% wasn't enough for the miners. They wanted it all. So they had this secondary filter, which they called rugging. It could have been a piece of felt or a corduroy, something that would trap those fine particles of gold that they could rinse into a container for later processing. Every hour or two, or every ton of rock they crushed, they would rinse that and replace it there for later processing. That slurry made its way onto the shaker table. The shaker table, by the way, has been redesigned. It's been redone, but it was done in the wrong direction. The shaker table should have the ribs running this way. So they rebuilt it a little bit wrong. But this table shook all day long. And this was their last chance to catch any of those gold particles that might have been missed so far. Well, now you had this retort with a jumble of metal particles. They were going to now heat it to 2,000 degrees. And at 2,000 degrees, you melt the gold, the silver, and the copper. And once you melt the gold, it'll displace everything else and pool on the bottom. The silver floats on the gold like oil in water, and the copper will float on that silver. Now the iron particles at 2,000 degrees are still solid. It takes nearly 2,800 degrees to melt that iron. So those particles encrust the top layer, they let it cool and harden, and then dump out the stratified mass of precious metal, where they can strike it with a hammer now and break the gold free from the silver, and creating what the miners called a button. Now this disc of gold, the miners collected these buttons until they had enough to make gold bars. At that point, they would send the gold bars to Wells Fargo to turn in for cash, because they use cash for all their expenses, to pay their miners daily, to pay the people cutting firewood for their steam engine. They paid all these people cash.
Now we're at the visitor center on the north entrance here of Joshua Tree National Park, and we saw this little mining exhibit, and so I wanted to walk you guys through some of the old equipment here. So here's this little jaw crusher. It's probably a 4x5 maybe. According to the little sign over there, this was all built circa 1930s, but this could actually be much older than that. It was probably used in the 30s. This is a really old jaw crusher design, where if you look over here, the bearing and the eccentric shaft is located down here. I don't know if this turns. Oh, it does turn. Look at that. As this turns, it would lift the jaw up and push this forward and backward and crush down here in the jaws. The little cast flywheels, just like the ones we have on our jaw, the shaft of our jaw sits up here, and it would run off a flat belt located over on this side. And so they'd hook a belt up here and run it off a motor. So this is their primary crusher, it looks like. They'd crush down through here, a bucket or something. Then they could take the crushed ore and they dump it in this hopper here as kind of a holding hopper. It appears that this thing went around slowly and would brush material down a little chute here. It'd come out this chute down into this Chilean mill. So the way a Chilean mill works, I've actually seen these a lot in northern Africa and Sudan and Mauritania. There's two big wheels, and this pan here holds the ore and water, and as these wheels go around, the crushed ore gets sloshed up through, in this one it's a screen, and so the ore stays inside this pan until it can go through the screen and down onto the shaker table. So it's kind of a cool design, real low maintenance. You just throw rocks in there. This whole thing goes around. The big spring here, which keeps tension on the wheels down. There's a sort of an anvil type plate down here that the wheels would run on. And these wheels just go around just like a flour mill, kind of crush the ore. It has water in it, and the water would slosh the ore, the crushed ore up, and it just go through all these little, all the way around the edge here. There's these little screens. Oftentimes they would use mercury, so they'd put mercury in with the ore, and I've seen that as well in Africa to capture the gold. But once the ore got fine enough, it'd slosh through these screens. There's a little trough pan here. And the water and the fine ore would come out this trough onto this super cool, old school shaker table. And it looks like the whole thing was powered by this old motor here. There's the shaft. It looks like it had a gear shift on it for different speeds, clutch. Shaft came out here. Big flat belt went on this thing. Up to here. Probably another belt off here to run the jaw crusher. And this whole thing ran all the Chilean mill and everything. And so that's how these old guys process their ore. Well, thanks for watching our video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. It's a little bit different than what we've done in the past, but it's always fun to go out and look at some of the old mines and get tours and see some of the history and all the stuff that we build and manufacture is still does the same stuff that these old piece of equipment did 100 years ago. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.